Awesome. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Design Process Interviews. My name is Billy Carlson. I'm here with Iheanyi Ekechukwu from GitHub, and today we're going to talk about design process and development because Iheanyi is a developer and he's going to walk us through how he sees design. So, welcome, Iheanyi. Let's talk about you. Tell us about your background and tell us about your work.
Yeah. Where do I start? I guess a background. I'm a senior software engineer at GitHub, working on GitHub Actions. I graduated in 2014 from Notre Dame, and I majored in computer science and graphic design. So I have a BS in computer science and a BA in design. But yeah, I've never really worked as a designer. I just do it for fun on my side projects, and I've never worked as a designer. I've just always been an engineer.
That's so cool. Notre Dame. I know Notre Dame has really good programs in design and in CS.
hmm
That's cool. That's something that a lot of people actually don't know. Well, sorry, Notre Dame. I don't want to say it like that, but it's not as
Yeah,
well known as far as I know because it's such a hard school to get into for everything else.
yeah, and it's also in the middle of nowhere, Indiana, so that didn't really help his case.
But yeah, I know that Notre Dame, at least for me, because I'm on the design side, I know they have a really good graphic design program. So that's really cool.
hmm
It's hard to double major at Notre Dame, mind you. So you have a good
Yeah,
plan.
I'd try. It was rough. I was like had to overload. Come on to graduate in 4.5 years rather than five, so I was like taking 21, 22 credits.
Wow. Um, so again, thank you for spending the time with us today. We really love digging in and talking about design from different perspectives. And as a
hmm
software engineer who's also studied design, you have a lot of knowledge about this. So can you maybe walk us through a few projects you've worked on?
Uh, the latest one I've been working on. So I have a job board as a service like side project I built called Seeker, and so I'm at Seeker.company. Design isn't like the greatest, but I designed it from the ground up, and I actually just finished over the last few weeks. I've been working on a redesign of it and been adding polish to that, and I'm like ready to start coding it up. Um, I've just made some miscellaneous apps in undergrad and whether it's I made a music streaming app, I made a mobile class search interface, I redesigned my school's class search interface portal for like a project in undergrad. So I just do like random projects, and that's where I do most of my design work at.
That's really cool. Uh, I love that because it's something that other people, like a lot of people should know is if you're going to become a good designer, you just got to do it and you have to start making it,
Yeah,
figuring it out. There's no playbook to follow. You kind of have to make your own.
yeah, I get frustrated because I know I guess like since I was taught how to critique things or like I guess have taste or whatever you want to call it. I always get frustrated because I'm like, wow, this could be so much better, and it's not. So that's why I hate doing design work most of the time.
That's funny. As a designer, I have the same feeling. I'm like, I wish this this was becoming better than it is. Um,
Yeah.
that's the whole part. It has to be iterative, and you have to keep building on it. So,
Yep. For sure.
uh,
Definitely.
yeah, okay. So, awesome. We can dig into probably Seeker or something. But so what I want to say is, these videos are intended for people who are either not designers or people who are new to design, so they're not as familiar with
hmm
what goes into designing something. So maybe you can, walk us through the process for how you created Seeker.
Yeah. So I actually worked on a website. So like I guess process for creating Seeker design wise and like in total.
In total, the whole thing. I love
Okay. I
hearing,
got
like, I really think it's interesting for people to hear how a whole product is built because
yeah.
the design is a part of like, the whole big process. So,
For sure, it's like one small step in it. So what had happened? What happened was I was working on a website with some buddies called it's an online magazine for that interviews creatives and designers and stuff like that. And inside of it, it had like a little job board widget that like was or it used to that hooked up to Panda Jobs at the time. So while creating the site, I was thinking about it and like, just embedding this job board into our product, or into our project. Like I was like, I think any community or content driven site should be able to have like a job board to like, monetize it. It's a dually aligned incentive. Like, audiences get custom job postings tailored to them. And the user makes money, and then also the companies can like sponsor and get their jobs out there. And I think that job boards or job postings are like one of the least intrusive forms of like ads per se, because
Yeah.
like it's beneficial. And if you don't really want a job or you're not looking for a job, like just ignore it, dude. So that's how I got the idea for Seeker. And it's like, a lot of it was just more of like writing out the requirements. Okay, I need a way for users to be able to get paid. I need users to be able to get their own like vanity or like their own URLs for each of the job boards. It needed to be customizable per se or something like that. And I needed a way to like take an application fee. And so like I wrote out like the technical requirements per se, but then I also started working on like designs for it, like after I got these ironed out. The design process for a Seeker wasn't really, normally I would do wireframes or something of the sort, but honestly, the older I get, the less I kind of wireframe. I just get an idea of just like what I want in my head, and I just start, well, I guess I do wireframe in a sense, just start drawing out blocks and like
Yeah.
go content and like in Figma and then build them out there. Back in the day, I used to like actually in undergrad, I used actually used to use Balsamiq in undergrad back whenever I was doing work for like school and stuff like that, or designing apps for side projects. But yeah, nowadays I know what I want already, and like Seeker is such a simple application that doesn't need that much like thought to go behind it. It's like really a very lean experience.
That's cool. And you designed
Yeah.
it that way, and that's how it probably should be, right?
Yeah.
That's really cool. I like it's funny because you're kind of talking about I don't wireframe, but you did sketches, which is wireframe. So it's interesting. I think some people have a perception that wireframes are only wireframes if they're really high fidelity, and there's a lot
Yeah.
of them. But it's really just about that drawing it out visually before you start writing the code or start applying high
Yeah.
fidelity design. Cool. But I'm curious. So, like, you did V1. How do you get to V2? What is that process of? You launched sort of like an MVP.
Yeah.
You go from there.
So it's like, so I launched an MVP, and like, revenues anything life changing, somewhere from like $300 to $400 a month. But I feel like it's like strong enough that the idea has been validated. And now rather than having just like a rough, like a diamond in the rough product, it needs to be refined and like built upon. So there was a lot of things in the design from V1 that I didn't like. In terms of like, and even there's a lot of tech debt that I need to actually address the pain to actually do. But for example, users wanted to have like the job board be more customizable. So like whenever I was designing V2 in mind, it's like, okay, I need to make one core like accent color and in the designs and utilize that for like buttons and stuff. So like when it comes to being overridable, it's simple to like add like a custom theme or like branding. Users wanted to upload their own logos to their job board. So I made sure to have like a widget in place for that in like the top left, and like, oh, so if the user has like a job board, if the user has a logo for the job board uploaded, it'll show here. Otherwise, it should just default to the name of the job board that they have on their settings page. So it's like small things about that, and like thinking about what like users have been asking me for, while also moving around things from like the V1, like, or just redesigning like the job listing widget or like the job description or the job detail view. It's like just redesigning those small like experiences and like adding a fresh coat of paint to those components was really how I thought about it.
That's awesome. So you mentioned that you got feedback from your users. Is that a lot of what drove the next version, or it was a combination of stuff you wanted to do plus stuff you heard from users?
I think it's a combination of both. Like the users don't really drive it, but at the same time, I want like even addressing their feedback. I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to address this or recode this or like implement this, I might as well just like do it whenever I recode the UI. And also, it's like the Seeker admin dashboard for like users to like change their settings or whatever, and like maybe upload new jobs, and just configure the site. It's actually like a separate URL. It's like at secret.company/ like dashboard or something like that. And then, you can have like balsamiq.secret.company. So there's like actually two different websites, but then like I wasn't thinking right, and their CSS is like intertwined and dependent on one another. So now I have to like actually, whenever I recode it or like implement this new design, I'm actually going to make sure to like implement their like their style sheets distinct from one another, and just in their JavaScript or just things that like make it like taking off the dependency between the two of them so they can just exist on their own. So yeah.
I'm sure that's fun and easy to figure out, right?
Yeah, I don't like writing CSS, but here we are.
What languages do you like to write in?
So I like, I do like writing a lot of Go. So I do a lot of systems work at GitHub now. So I write a lot of Go to do some backend stuff. I like Python, but I use it in Seeker, but I've never really used it in my career. Just only in side projects. But yeah, Go is probably my favorite language right now. JavaScript, I like it for like doing front end work, or TypeScript for doing front end work. I don't like using Node.js for building out backend services because for concurrency reasons and like technical reasons and performance reasons. So yeah.
There's a lot that goes into writing code, like you said. Performance is a
Yeah.
big part of it. Cleanness, and it's like design. There's a lot that goes into
Yeah.
it. I think that's interesting. Let's maybe talk a little bit about that. How would you see design and code, the similarities, if they're, what do you see are some?
So I think similarities between designing and developing. A lot of things that I taught, like something that I took from me, that I took from design school and I carry with me in my career is like, every time whenever I was in design school, we'd have projects assigned to us, and every couple of weeks we'd have a day for like critique. You put your code up in front of your peers, and people just start giving feedback on it. But it's like, you can't just give shallow feedback of like, I like, I don't like. Honestly, Professor Sedlak, my professor for that class, every time he like somebody be like, I like, he'd be like, try another word, and like say like he banned a phrase whenever people would use it. So it makes you think like, I think this is successful. I think this is unsuccessful because, or I think this is performing is very strong. Like is communicating your message of X well because, and forcing you to give like deep objective feedback rather than just like, not deep rather, but like it makes your feedback more objective rather than just subjective. I mean, all feedback in itself can be subjective, but it makes you give like a valid reason rather than just something like that could be superficial. Like, oh, I like how you did the typography. Like, okay, cool. Like, it's not really constructive. It's just like a feel good statement. So in the same vein, I try to do the same whenever I'm doing code reviews with like peers. It's like my style of code review feedback is just like, hey, I think this is like, I think this is like performing really strongly like here, but also it's like, but I think you could get better performance or something if you do it like this way. I don't really band I like. The only time I ban I like is for me saying, I ban myself from saying I like doing it this way, so I'm going to do it this way. Like that's not helpful to anybody, right? But it doesn't help to like tell you. It doesn't hurt to tell like your peers, oh, I like what you did here. This is really cool. Like way of like solving this or like implementing this. So I try to carry that feedback with me. And like we talked earlier about how design is just iterative, right? Code is iterative as well. You always have to iterate, and like you should not have any sense of like personal self or being into your work, because there's lots of things that like that design in school that like I just had to throw it out and start from scratch. So code is like the same way. It should be ephemeral. It shouldn't be like something that you can see and like putting like it's not art, right? You're not going to put your sense of being into like what a piece that you create or like a design that you create, or at least you shouldn't, because it's not an art piece. It's just like you're designing a solution to a problem, where you're designing a message to be communicated. you
Yeah.
know. So,
I
and
love
code's the same way, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So what I like and I think is interesting is maybe a lot of people don't even know that there are things as code reviews and that you can solve a software, development problem in different ways and all have the same outcome.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's really interesting. You actually wrote a great article about what you learned from design school and applied it to being a developer. So I'll post a link to that. It's a great article, and I think a lot of people should check it out.
That's up. Thanks.
No problem. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is so you have lots of other projects you've done. Seeker is one, and you have professional work, but as a developer, do you do any sort of like ideation phase or generative phase where there's like, okay, I have one problem I'm trying to solve. Here's 10 ways to do it. Do you ever think like that? Or is there any process for that?
Kind of, but not really. Because like it's hard because I don't know. A lot of times I just use my gut feeling, and like I may tweak something and like be like, okay, I wonder how it looks this way, and then I'm like maybe duplicate it, move things around, and then see how it goes, and then I'm like compare it to what I had before. Then I look back, and I look back again, and I'm like, sometimes I like the way I did, like then I like the new direction more. Sometimes I don't. I just go back to what I had before. And like sometimes if I'm really unsure, I just go back to I ask my friends like, yo, take a look at these two designs. Which one do you think is stronger? Um, or which one like to you seems more intuitive? And they'll be like, oh, this one because X, Y, Z. Um, yeah. So it's like I
Yeah.
really don't. I guess I'm like strapped for time, so it's like I feel like I can't crank out five different like concepts or designs of the same thing. I'm like I barely have enough time to like do one.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's definitely how the real world works, where sometimes you just have to get going and you have to make something, and then you have to ask people what they think, and um, iterate from the user's feedback and go from there, like you did with Seeker.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So that's just a question that I've kind of been asking more lately because I think there's like this big difference between what you learn in school and what you do in the real world. So,
Oh, definitely. I don't use most of my computers. I mean, the only thing I use for my education is like learning how to program in the real world. Like algorithms, yeah, they're helpful, but I don't ever use them. So there's that.
yeah, I'm really curious. Like a CS degree, I've always heard it seems like an art degree. It's like really broad, and then you have to you learn the basics, and you have to sort of dig in and teach yourself the more specifics.
Yeah, that's exactly what ended up happening with me.
Yeah, that's good.
Like Ruby on Rails or like code frameworks and coding. Like CS doesn't necessarily teach you how to build a product. It teaches you how to solve problems and like maybe break down a large problem to a smaller one. Like and one of my friends, Dara, she told me she said one time, my computer science degree didn't teach me how to code. It taught me how to think. And I like that kind of really resonated with me. I'm like, yeah, that's like encapsulates like my
Yeah.
experience as well. Like just thinking about things somewhat differently in terms of systems and like all of that good stuff.
It's interesting because that's how I feel about my design degree and design degrees in general. We're not going to teach you exactly how to do stuff. We're going to tell you like how to design something broadly. Like these are the steps
Yeah,
there for good design. And I just love the parallels between the two, because one is like design is seen as artistic, and it's actually based on lots of systems thinking. That's successful
yeah,
designs. And then CS is pretty similar.
right. And you have like, design is like solving a problem. Like, I think the thing is like design is made to solve a problem and like you have a specific thing that you're trying to solve, whether it's industrial design and like making a physical product, tangible product for like individuals to use, visual information design, what is the message that you want your like, what you're designing to send out, even if it's for like an awareness, like an advertising campaign or awareness campaign or something, or a product design, like you're building something for like the users to interact with. Whereas, there's always like a debate, like is design art. And but it's like I feel like design is more objective than art, which is subjective. Like art is made to be interpreted, and like design is created to like solve a problem.
Yeah, I love that.
So
Totally. Yeah. That's great. It's
I'm pretty
something
sure that's
that
what my professor said. I can't remember who told me that, but it's like I've heard it before.
it's so true. It's interesting because I feel like the program that I was in had a combination. Some professors were very much like, this is communicating concepts, and it's like making sure that everyone understands, it's probably understood, and the choices you make reflect what you want to communicate. And then
Hmm.
others are like, you're also an artist, so create amazing art.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my
And,
designer friends are amazing artists as well, right?
yeah,
They're like, you have to have the creativity to like, I think it takes a creative brain to be like a really good designer. That's why I also posited that I'm a bad designer. But you also, it's not like you're working a vacuum. Like you have to take art classes. Like I took photography, drawing, 3D graphics, some other stuff. Like like art electives that like to keep the creative juices flowing, and you
yeah.
take those in tandem with design courses. So
Yeah, totally. They make you. I have a fine arts degree, so they make you take everything. Do you feel like, and I know that we touched on this a little bit, so maybe this will just be an added answer to that question, but
mhm.
do you feel that having your design degree really benefits your work as a professional software developer?
Yes, but not in like the way of like me being able to do it all. It's like more the way from like communication. So like I worked at like GitHub's my third job. I worked at IBM, then I worked at DigitalOcean, which is a startup, and now I'm at GitHub. IBM, it didn't feel as helpful whenever I was at IBM Watson because of just it was weird. Like the company's perception of engineers can also like change. Like engineers weren't seen as people that should have opinions about design. So it's like, but it's weird, right? So like my opinions would just get like disregarded because you're just like, oh, you're an engineer. Like, what do you know? But it's like, I have a design degree. Like, I'm not. And at the same time, I think you should take everybody's feedback into consideration and
Exactly.
like or at least hear it. So let's stop like gatekeeping aside.
Yeah.
DigitalOcean working at a startup, it was better because it was cool because having this design degree and like being able to communicate with the designer I worked or designers I worked with. Like sometimes something would feel off, and I would give feedback on like that. I'm just like, oh, like the lighting feels a little bit too tight here or something like that. Can we like bump it up a little bit? And being able to like, speak their lingo and being able to know what I'm talking about gave helps. And also when people seem to be miscommunicating between the two, like I work with engineers and we work with like designers, but it's like sometimes engineers don't know what it is that they're trying to communicate. And like I listen, like it's helpful to listening to like what they are thinking about or trying to say, and then like being able to like translate it into something, like translate like what their message is to like the designer and like craft that feedback.
Yeah. That's really cool. Um, so my next question is, it's sort of another broad question. So
Sure.
excuse me, but so one of the things that we talk and write about on the Balsamiq education team is understanding basic UI principles. And I'm
Yeah.
curious if, as you're making these different software, do you ever look up or do you try to find out like what are best practices? Do you feel like you know them? Like, how do you go about learning that if you do?
I think a really good foundational book is like Don't Make Me Think. I can't remember who wrote that, but I
Steve?
read that like yeah, it's like Steve somebody.
Yeah.
Um, I read that book back in 2015, I think, or like 2015 or 2014. But it's like I think that's a good foundational book about just like thinking about like UI, not even UI, like the user experience and like things like how users should interact with it. Another book that's pretty dry in my opinion, but like it's also recommended for like thinking about the UX stuff is like Design of Everyday Things. Like it's a very dry book in my opinion, but it's good. It has good content in it. But for UI best practices, I feel like the UI landscape has been changing. Went from skeuomorphism to like flat, and now you got like some hybrid with like material design stuff like that. Um, but I think for UI best practices, is just like I try to find like for like Seeker, I like did a lot of research and did like for inspiration, I went to a whole bunch of different job boards. Um, like both the ones that people create themselves or like, ones that companies may use to recruit. And I started to like pick out like patterns I see that I saw in all of them. And then it's a matter of like some people do things differently, and it's just a matter of like taking a smattering of like things that you like from each and blending them all together. It's like what like good artists copy, great artists steal. Like it's a matter of like taking those concepts and like um, bringing them into your piece or like into your work. Because like why try and create something new and avant-garde, or it can come off as avant-garde whenever there's people out there that have been like running like job boards successfully, and you can at least get inspired by what they've done and like use it like use components from like their job boards inside of your design. So
That's great. That's something that I tell a lot of people is I call it copying to learn. So if you want to learn some best practices, a good place to start is checking out stuff that really resonates with you that you think is really well designed and apply it to
yeah,
your idea. So it's like, I have an idea for a job board. I'm going to take Yelp, or I'll take Grubhub's interface and I'll redesign it and add my own content and just see how it fits. And I think
yeah.
it's a great way to learn. Um, you don't really maybe understand exactly why you're doing what you're doing, but you're sort of learning what good looks like. And if you keep practicing that, you'll start developing your own style and understanding why things go where they should go.
Yeah, it's kind of like reading somebody else's, like, I guess it's like drawing parallels back to developer stuff. It's like, okay, like, rather than reinventing the wheel, like, you can, like, find an open source package that does what you need, import it, and use it. And if you look at the source code, you can see how they would, like, how they are doing it, but, like, and understand that, but, like, rather than trying to figure it out on your own and write it yourself. So,
Yeah, I see it. I really love drawing parallels between how both of us, our careers, I don't know, both of our
yeah.
types of work together, because it is something that I always feel like there's tension between developers and designers, but in reality, we do very similar things.
I think it's because designers are getting tired of should designers blank,
Yeah,
and normally it's like code for the longest time. Whereas nobody asks like should developers design, right? And I think
yeah,
all developers should at least have like some concept, especially if you're doing front end work, like or mobile work, you should have some like foundation in design, or at least know basics or fundamentals, because it's
yeah.
helpful to your users, it will be beneficial to you, and it'll be make you a more productive individual, in my opinion.
Awesome. But what I liked about what you spoke about with learning or understanding UI is you just do like a competitive analysis. Like, let's see what's out there.
Hmm.
Let's see what exists, and I want to take what I like from all of them. A lot of designers that I know, like the older you get and the more senior you are as a designer, you start saying like, I've never, like I always say this, I haven't designed an original thing in my career. I just take bits and pieces of
Yeah.
stuff I like and I make my own. And that's just how it goes, because again, just like you said, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I want to, like, if I'm making an application or a website that has a specific purpose, I'm not going to make it confusing for my users to invent totally new ways to accomplish goals that they can accomplish on other sites. So,
Yeah.
okay. So I'm going to wrap it up a little bit. I just have one question,
Yes,
one
sir.
more. Well, I got two more questions. So the next one is, how does feedback work with you? So we did talk about your app and you got user feedback, but how does feedback play a role in your sort of product development?
I kind of use it for prioritizing features and like, things that need fixing. Like, of course, some feedback is prioritized higher. Customer bugs, obviously, number one to fix. Number two is like keeping track of like features that people constantly are requesting, but that's also scoped by like difficulty. Like if it's something's like normally use like t-shirt sizing and like analogy for sizing how big something is, like small, medium, large. And like
Yeah.
if it's a large, probably not going to get to it anytime soon. But if it's like a small or medium and it's a small win, I'm gonna add it in there. So yeah, that's how feedback really plays a role in like my for at least product development. And like if like 10 users or like or like half my paying users are asking for the same feature, it's probably something critical I should work on that end, right?
Yeah, that's great. That's very true. Okay, and then my last question is, Um, my last one is, what do you do once it's released? So you've created everything. It's finally out in the wild. Like, what's next?
Post a product hunt, post a Hacker News, advertise. Try and I don't know sales. I suck at sales, and I just don't like doing it. It takes a lot of time to reach out to people and like send them tailored emails. I don't believe in the impersonalness of like automating that way. What do I do next? Yeah, that's about it. I mean, tweet about
Promotion.
it, and yeah, and like normally just spreads organically through word of mouth, right? So try to seize that.
That's very cool. Well, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add, so let me know.
Let me think. Yeah, I mean, I guess should I just plug where you can find me on like the internet?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I guess you can find me. You can check out Seeker at seeker.company. It's a very weird URL, I know. You can follow me at Kwuchu on Twitter. That's KWUCHU if you want to follow me there. And yeah, I write sometimes at Iheanyi.com, just my first name.com. So yeah,
Awesome. I will
thanks
definitely
for
add
having
those
me.
links. Of course. I really appreciate the conversation. I can talk about this stuff all day, but I don't want to make a 2 hour long video.
Yeah, I feel that. Understandable.
Well, thank you again. And yeah, we'll be in touch.
Yes, sir. Thanks.
Um,
Take care.